So I'm okay, nice. So I'm going to call the meeting to order. It is 3 o'clock. So welcome everyone. Thank you for attending today's meeting of the San Francisco Children and Youth Fund Oversight and Advisory Committee. My name is Jada, and I am the newly appointed chair of the OAC. We ask that everyone please mute themselves when not speaking to avoid sound interference. If you're a member of the public and would like to speak, please raise your hand and I will call you for public comment. And just as a reminder, comments are limited to 2 minutes per speaker. So let's get into our first item, which is the call to order and roll call. Rebecca, can you please start the roll call?
Member Aaron Yen.
Here.
Chair Jada Curry.
Present.
Member John Henry.
Present.
Member Julie Roberts Fung. Absent. Member Leslie Simmons.
Present.
Vice Chair Molly Matul.
Here.
We have quorum.
All right, thank you, Rebecca. And just very briefly, before we move on, I would just like to formally acknowledge that we have 2 new members with us right now. In seat 4 is Leslie, and then in seat 6 is John. So Leslie and John, if you want to unmute, introduce yourself, say anything, please do.
Thank you. Hi, as I was introduced, my name is Leslie Simmons. I am originally from Southern California and have lived in the Bay Area for more than 12 years now. And I am the mother of a 9-year-old who is attending San Francisco Public Schools, and we are very active in and around the community. And I'm really excited to work with you all and everyone on the call to improve lives for our kids here in the city. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is John Henry. Born and raised in San Francisco, Bayview, Hunters Point, D10. Have a daughter and a grandchild, and just excited to continue to do the work that I've been doing in community. So this opportunity is special to me, just to kind of learn and process what's going on behind the scenes to have better impact for our youth and families in San Francisco. So excited to be a part of it, everybody.
All right, thank you. Thank you both for introducing yourself and looking forward to working together. So we can move on to our second item, general public comment. Anthony, is there any public comment for item? Oh, yes.
Chair Jada, would it be okay if we could just introduce the other members of the OAC to our 2 new members?
Yes, that makes sense. That makes sense. Since I'm already unmuted, I'll go ahead and go first. So my name is Jada Curry, born and raised in the city. I am on seat 7, so that's the seat representing transitional age youth. Yeah, I guess that's what I'll say.
Hey everyone, good afternoon. Sorry, Molly.
No, go ahead. You go ahead.
Doing here. I know John, very happy to have you on this thing, man. Totally happy to have you on here. And Leslie, I look forward to getting to know you. My name is Aaron Yen. I'm born and raised in the city as well. I believe my chair 10. Yeah, happy to be here. I'm currently DPH, Department of Health. I'm the Chief Equity Officer. I have a son, 12 years old. Worked in public schools for a long time in San Francisco before my stint with the city. So happy to have you guys. Great to have you all here. Looking forward to working with you all.
Hello and welcome. I am Molly Matul, and I am seat 3, I think. But I know what it is. I don't know what the number is. I represent parents of older children in San Francisco Unified School District, and my children have both have gone through the San Francisco public schools from ages 1 and 3 months to now having graduated from all the way through high school through San Francisco public schools, and now through California and Washington State public schools too. So there, although one is still in school. Anyways, I live and work in the Presidio, so you'll hear me talk about all the wonderful things about the Presidio here and there, and I look forward to working with you guys. Welcome.
All right, thank you. And just want to acknowledge that member Julie has joined us. Julie, not to put you on the spot, but if we just finished introductions, we have two new members, Leslie and John's on seats 4 and 6. So if you want to share anything at this moment, you can go ahead and introduce yourself if you would like.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Jada. My name's Julie Roberts-Fung. Welcome, Member Leslie and Member John. It's great to have you with us. Apologies for my video. Zoom probably needs to be restarted. So if we get a break, I may try to do that. I am in the role of seat 8, which is a parent of kids between kindergarten and 8th grade in the city. And I do have one elementary school and one middle school student. We live in the Western Addition, and my kids go to school in the Tenderloin. So those are two communities that are really close to my heart. And welcome. I'm really looking forward to serving with you.
All right, everyone. Thank you. So now moving on to our second item, general public comment. Anthony, is there any public comment for items not listed on the agenda?
No speakers in the queue.
All right, since there are no speakers in the queue, public comment is now closed, and we can move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the review and approval of the minutes. Are there any comments from the committee on June's meeting minutes? All right, seeing no comments, do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I motion to approve the minutes.
All right, do we have a second?
A second.
All right, Rebecca, can you please take a roll call vote?
Member Erin Yang,
Aye.
Chair Jada Curry,
Yes.
Member John Henry,
Yes.
Member Julie Roberts-Fung,
Yes.
Member Leslie Simmons,
Yes.
Vice Chair Matul.
Yes.
The minutes are adopted or approved, sorry.
All right, thank you. Is there any public comment on this item, Anthony?
There are no speakers in the queue.
All right, so public comment is closed. All right, so the next item on the agenda, last order of business before we get into our meeting, the resolution to allow teleconference meetings. Committee members, do we have a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, Rebecca, can you please take a roll call vote?
Member Yen,
Yes.
Chair Curry,
Yes.
Member Henry,
Yes.
Member Roberts-Fung,
Yes.
Member Simmons,
Yes.
Vice Chair Matul.
Yes.
The resolution is approved.
All right, Anthony, is there any public comment on this item?
There are no speakers in the queue.
All right, thank you. So now we can get into the actual meat of the meeting. So the next item is the report of the Service Provider Working Group. So any of the SPWG tri-chairs who are present can now report.
Hi, it's Madison. Can you hear? I don't think I'm on the screen. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. I think I do. I see you on the screen and I think your hand is up. I'm not sure.
Oh,
I can move you guys to a panelist if you would like.
okay, sure. There we go. Okay. Hi, everyone. I know we have some new seats, which we're very excited about to have new members here. My name is Madison. I am one of the 3 tri-chairs of the Service Providers Working Group. I'm with the Boys and Girls Clubs of San Francisco, she, her pronouns, and one of the third tri-chair is not here today, Keon. He is with Good Samaritan Family Resource Center, and I will pass it over to Frederic, who is the other tri-chair.
Hi, my name is Frederic Claremont. I'm with Friends of the Children, and currently we are happy to see all your faces. Some I know from different spaces. How's it going, John? And hopefully we can start this year with the wonderful topic of the service allocation plan. So, so Madison, why don't you start with, actually, I believe.
Yeah, I was going to start with an update from our last meeting.
Yes.
So one of the goals of the Service Provider Working Group, we work with a bunch of different DCYF grantees, but our membership is not exclusive to DCYF grantees. We work with anyone who's a youth service provider here in the city. And so we have monthly meetings with representation from anywhere between 10 and 50 organizations, just depending on the month. So just sharing an update of our meeting from this past August. We really use that space just to talk through what service providers were going through, what they were experiencing in this back to school time period, and kind of what were some of the challenges. And so I'm just going to share with you all some of the things that came up and what's going on the ground right now. And a lot of it is going to be stuff that is not new to all of you. The number one thing is staff shortages and just the challenges with hiring. It's having a huge impact. Me and Frederic were just talking about this. I myself am stepping into program oftentimes. And so it's just a huge shortage across the board, which affects our quality of programs. It affects staff burnout, mental health, all of those things. And then additionally, it's leading to longer wait lists and larger wait lists. And then obviously we know school schedules have changed. And so there's a greater need for before school care at a lot of schools as well. And so with a lack of staff and changing schedules and greater need for care, this is just kind of a huge challenge that everyone is feeling at every level of the organization. And then obviously families and kids are feeling it as well. Another thing that came up was just given kind of the cycle of staff going out, the number of new staff that the majority of our organizations have, and the need for more professional development and training. Because so many of us are so short-staffed, oftentimes we're hiring on people with little to no experience and really trying to get them up to speed on what it means to work with kids and what are some, helpful ways to get them integrated and really understand all of the different organizations' approaches to working with youth. So I'll drop in the chat. One thing we wanted to do was not just come with challenges, but come with some ideas. So I'll put in the chat some of the different ideas of trainings that people said would be helpful for DCYF to provide to be able to send their staff to those trainings. So I'll send some of those categories that we came up with. And then the last two buckets of areas of challenge, again, not new, but the need for mental health services, both for our youth and then also for our staff who are experiencing burnout. And then lastly, I'm not sure if we've talked about it in this specific space, but YPQA, which is the Youth Program Quality Assessment tool that DCYF uses, is coming back this fall. Some of us experienced it a little bit this past spring, but it was not in full force and using the tool in its entirety. And so there was some concerns from the field just around the added kind of administrative duties and kind of staffing needs of administering the YPQA. So those were just some things that are going on the ground and some concerns that people have. And with that, I will pass it over to Frederic to talk about DNA and SAP.
Yes, so we, as part of the prepping for the service allocation plan, we had a very productive meeting with Omijo and Dory, and we came up with some strategies and brainstorming regarding how to unpack that 500-page document that we've recognized the amount of time and input, but at the same time, it's something that's it's hard to digest, and specifically with having questions around certain specific elements. So for example, one of the things that we proposed was having these deep dive meetings based on elements with potential expertise in the room virtually, so we can have conversations about what exactly is being gathered with the nonprofit lens involved. So we're going to leverage, hopefully, our membership and our understanding of the lay of the land with our membership in partnership with DCYF and Amijo and Dory. Thank you so much for meeting with us and our core team regarding ideas, because I believe that we all believe that this is crucial to our work. And without it, we want to make sure that the dollars being spent are being spent in a way that is to meet the needs of those we support and serve. So having said that, we are also in the process of, we have an announcement in that our administrative support person who allows us to do the work that we do is leaving. So he's Ahmed, who has been with us for a long time, will be moved, has found a wonderful opportunity with Dolores Housing Services. And as a result, we're looking at the best ways to support the efforts that our membership would like to do. And in doing so, look at the capacity issues and challenges that we have faced and how to best to strengthen that with the service allocation plan in mind, because this is something that's really dear to our hearts. Although we joke about it, but we know it has to be done. And welcome to the new members, and welcome to some of the new faces as well as the old faces. I actually miss seeing some of you.
All right. Thank you for the report. And Madison, thank you for sending the topic ideas I just seen in the chat. Is there any oh, sorry. I'm going to go ahead and go with public comment first. I know that was a change that we discussed, and I've been doing it backwards. So Anthony, is there any public comment on this item?
There are no speakers in the queue.
All right, so public comment is closed, and then we can move into our committee member discussion. So is there any comment from the committee on the SPWG report? All right, Julie, do I have the ability to? Oh, no, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
I wanted to thank the Service Provider Working Group for your comments, and also all of your members and staff for all the work that you've been doing for students. You know, the work that you do is crucial, and we've been talking for quite a bit of time about the need to enable nonprofit workers to live in the city and do have living wage jobs to do this important work that they're doing. So, you know, sadly, it's not surprising that we're still seeing issues of staff shortages. I have a question about that. And then another comment, one of the impacts that we're seeing in the Tenderloin is that the SFUSD out of school time programs have been cut. You know, they're crunch. Several of them have been closed in the Bayview and in other neighborhoods. And the nonprofit partners either aren't able to serve the same constituency like TK students, or you know, the number of seats at the nonprofit partner sites have not been expanded to reflect the cut to the school community. So I'm curious if there are efforts to kind of assess where there may be additional need, either because we're more in person than we may have been over the past couple of years, or there may be additional needs as people go back to work, or or needs based on cuts, and whether we have an assessment of what it would look like to actually fully provide the number of seats that our families need in the city. And then I imagine, Director Sue, you'll probably give us an update in your director's report, but I'm wondering if we have updates on efforts to increase wages for nonprofit and other city workers, and if we can kind of hear what progress we may have seen on that.
I can briefly talk a little bit about that now. So in terms of the wages piece, the mayor's office and the board of supervisors landed on a agreed budget in August, and it was signed into law. Part of that budget allocates cost of doing business increases to nonprofit agencies. And so DCYF is in the process of adding all of that into CBO's grants. If I'm not mistaken, it's actually already in. It's moved. We were prepared for it, so we moved relatively quickly so that CBOs can have access to those dollars and add it into your work plans right away. So there's that piece. Now, the controller's office was also leading a process to really think about how do we do a more sustained and long-term evaluation of wages in our city, particularly for our nonprofit agencies. And the strategy that they used was to really think about classifications of positions. So they went through a process to identify positions that had the most difficult time to hire and sustain staff, so that they can then focus on that and really think about how to hire up and how to keep people employed for a longer period of time, because we know the longer people stay in their jobs, the better outcomes for the services that they provide. I don't remember which service area they ended up choosing to highlight. Amiho, do you know if they are done with that process? Have they identified which positions they were going to focus in on?
So actually there's an additional layer to that process. So the controller is actually going to do some, so they did that part. That was what led to the CODB, the cost of doing business increases that are in place now. But they are also going to do an additional layer of data collection, which includes both a survey and more like a focus group with CBOs to try to go a lot deeper and to try to get a better sense of sort of the nuances of these challenges. And so we have given them, so it's going to be, they're pulling from a sample of providers across city departments, including us. DCYF and the homelessness department are of particular interest because we have a large chunk of workers who kind of fall in the lower range of that wage scale. And so they're looking very closely at our grantees. And so we've given them some names, and that process is going to kick off in the next, maybe month or so. And the idea is for them to try to look for the long-term solution. So they try to come up with a short-term additional money solution, which we of course know is not quite enough really to actually solve the problem. But they're also looking at longer-term solutions. So ways to do contracting different, building in escalators into contracts like as a standard practice, looking at wage scales or wage floors or that kind of thing, just to kind of pull the entire system up. And so their data collection over the next several months is going to be really focused on that. And that actually aligns well with our work around the allocation plan and then the RFP, so that hopefully some of the, the fruits of that labor can actually end up in our RFP when we actually, essentially put rubber to the road and get money out to CBOs.
And I'll just share from the service provider working group perspective. I think most of you know this has been like our #1 priority for the last 4 years, but we are a volunteer run organization. And so as I speak on staff shortages and capacity, we all are limited by those factors as well. And so we are looking into opportunities to build up our infrastructure to have more dedicated paid resources and people to be able to push this work forward in partnership with the city, because we acknowledge and appreciate Maria's support in trying to hold the city accountable and the role that they play in this. But also we know that we want to make sure that we're driving this effort equally hand in hand, working in partnership with the city so that whatever solutions are put forward, we have a voice in those as well. So that's where we are at. Hopefully we'll have good news to share in the next couple of months, but we're working on it.
Chair Jada, I see Vice Chair Molly as well as Member Aaron's hands raised. Are you, I don't know.
Yeah, you can go ahead and unmute. Yeah.
Thank you. Outside of I just had a question in terms of the staffing issues outside of the wage, and this is for anybody, Maria, Amiho, Madison, Frederick, whoever. I'm curious, what are the other barriers to hiring that you're seeing? Are people just not applying? Is it, I get, again, outside of the money issue.
I can speak very quickly about this, but what we hear a lot is definitely not enough people applying. But it's also, there's competition for the limited number of people. So once people come on to a CBO, Madison and Frederic, actually anyone can speak to this. You spend a lot of time and energy to train the person up. And then unfortunately they get offered a much better position and then they leave. And so you end up in this really horrible cycle of constantly training new people, which is what Madison and Frederic has been talking about, of just having more opportunities for trainings for folks. But it does turn into a very terrible cycle where you're constantly training new people.
Got it.
The other thing that we're hearing is, oddly enough, space issues. So there's spacing shortage with SFUSD coming back to pre-pandemic levels. We're back to the not enough room to do some of our work in. But that is not the most central issue. The most central issue is just not having enough staff, not being able to retain the staff. It's, as CBO should be, they should be picky on who they want to hire to serve our children. And so when you're that picky, it's hard.
Got it. Great, thank you.
I would say also, given COVID and the pandemic, I think the lack of applicants, and then also we've been shocked at just people have a lot more options, right? And they want remote work, they want less stress. The burnout is real in this work right now. And so people are just kind of reprioritizing their lives and what they see for their career. And so, people have a lot more options, and so they just don't show up to interviews, or they apply and then they don't answer phone calls. And so it's just, I think there's a lot of layers to it. Definitely commute, people are reassessing. Traffic is back in full force. Those of you who drive across the bridge know this. And it's a lot of compounding factors, I would say, that are affecting our ability to really hire and retain good people right now.
Got it.
And one last thing to add to that, it's also what we value as the service being provided, right? So does it really cost X number to be a youth worker for a job that has so many layers of skills and knowledge base? Are we undervaluing what the cost is? Because that same role in a different industry, you get paid more. And so that's why I don't show up to an interview if I know I can do the same work at Kaiser or somebody else and have a quality of life that I can raise my family in. And on top of that, I know when we say wage equity, it's also who's working in the field as well. A lot of people who work in a nonprofit, there's a why that really aligns with their lived experience, where you see many more Black, brown, yellow working in the field, as well as the gender. And what does that say about our society and what we also expect from those who serve those who have the highest need? I didn't want to go there, but I felt I had to, so my apologies.
Thank you for your comment.
All right, Aaron, do you want to go ahead and unmute?
Yeah, well, first off, number one, I just want to thank Madison and you, Frederic, for the report on just everything that you guys are currently doing and will be continuing to do. I highly respect everything that you guys put forward. And I had a question very similar to Molly, and I can just say I 1000% relate with that issue. And I'm wondering too, only because I myself was one of those kids who grew up, became kind of like a teen counselor, moved up, and just was very fortunate to move up in the youth work world for several years, and then became a director. So I know the grind, how difficult it is, and I'm very familiar with the staffing kind of hardships, and I know that the pandemic threw that into a whole nother stratosphere. I 1000% feel for you guys. I'm wondering, in terms of like attraction level to, I think one of the things that maybe this is not even really a question, but just for the whole group here. I remember when I went to college, one of my professors told me, they made it very apparent to our group in child development at SF State that was like, hey, you guys are the group that's going to professionalize this field. They don't take you seriously because they don't professionalize. You haven't professionalized it. And I'm wondering, do you think that comes into play a little bit in terms of like the attraction level? Because I remember when I was in it, there was always that question of like, where does this ultimately take me outside of my passion? And Madison, when you told me about the burnout, I know exactly what you're talking about. And we constantly met with our staff around this. But do you feel like that's also part of this issue as well, in terms of like, where does this ultimately go? Because I know in nonprofit, director, manager positions are very few and far between. And would it be helpful if this group or we work with DCYF to I don't know how we can make it more attractive, but really delineate where this could lead you, because I feel like we have a shortage in teachers. We have a shortage in a lot of this, our youth serving practices. And I don't know if we create some momentum in how we kind of attract more people to become part of this world, which is very fruitful. May not pay much, but if we could show where it leads to, I think maybe, I don't know, maybe that's just wishful thinking.
That's a big question. And I mean, so yeah, like,
And I know
what I'll
Maria
say-
shared some thoughts on this too, right?
yeah, like our number one goal, like, well, I won't say number one, we have lots of things that we do as a service provider working group, but is like, I mean, it's a value shift in society, right? Like, it's not just youth serving nonprofit workers, it's teachers, it's case managers, it's all of these people that are just undervalued. And so us as a group working in partnership with the city, our goal is to change the narrative and to see more value, and to say that passion does not have to equate to underpay. Like, you should be able to do what you love and serve your community and live a high quality life. And that is the narrative and the advocacy work that we've really tried to rally around and build for the last couple of years, and are going to continue to try to advance. And there are a lot of different ways that we can go about it. I think we've had a lot of conversations, and with Maria in particular, around professionalizing the workforce and what does that mean? And how do you do that in a way that doesn't cut people out that might not have education at certain levels, that we know, like, people coming from certain communities have the skills that oftentimes lead to better services than people with a degree, right? And so how do we professionalize the workforce in a way that's inclusive? But ultimately, like, that's the question that we have all been working towards, and figuring out how we have this value shift in San Francisco as a city that leads in progressive values and in having narrative shifts. How can we do that when it comes to youth serving nonprofit workers, and how do we pay people more so that, we shouldn't have to take a pay cut to do what we love and to serve our communities at all.
Can I jump in here? Not to say that the SPWG should do more work, but this is where maybe the partnership work can be, because I 100% agree with you, Erin. We need to start promoting youth work as a field, as a
Nonprofit sector.
Similar to what, the conversations I've been having with SPWG. But part of that is also, like, the city needs to start doing some highlights about this particular youth worker. And, Madison Holland, she works at Boys and Girls Club, and this is how amazing she, like, there has to be more of that type of PRing of our field, so that people can see that it's value based, and it's not just like warm and fuzzy glorified babysitting. It's you're actually moving a generation, and I think it's changing that type of narrative. But of course, that's a heavy lift, and that's something that we are ready to work with you all on, because I think it does go hand in hand with trying to secure increased wages, at the same time trying to bring in new interest and new people into the field.
Yes, and right, and the way I would phrase it is that there is a field called the nonprofit sector that's an industry. And your value of your why, to Aaron's point about loving the work that you do, should not then lead you down a path where you can't earn a living wage. That is the disservice. That is the disservice that if I have a youth or I have somebody who loves to work with kids, and then I have somebody who says, oh, I can go to Year Up and get a better placement, the paths are drastically different, and that should not be the case. So I think we're all in agreement. But it's really I think a value that needs to be communicated, educated throughout about the importance of what we mean to the city. And that includes work at Park and Rec, that includes work at California Academy of Sciences, SFUSD, that there's a value to this that should not, because of who is being served and who takes these roles, that they are professionals.
All right, Leslie, do you want to go ahead and unmute and just want to, sorry, Leslie, before you go ahead and speak, we had about 10 minutes allocated, but we don't have too much on the agenda, but just want to keep the rest of the discussion moving along so we can get to item 6 next.
I'll go quickly. Thank you. I agree with everything that's been said, particularly around the communication piece. And that is my background professionally in public relations, reporting, and now communication. So I'm happy to help support that however I can. I completely agree that just a lot of this, I think, is reframing and ways to do that. And I feel like, Madison, I love your point about San Francisco being a seat of, progressivity in so many places. This feels like a perfect breeding ground to test out some new messaging around how we talk about this kind of work. So I'd love to help with that. And I wanted to go back and talk a little bit, just a quick question about the training that you mentioned here in the chat, these topics. So these are topics that organizations are saying they need training on that they don't currently have access to. Are these things that sort of, I guess my question maybe would be, is in an ideal state, how would they be receiving this kind of training, or where would this come from?
So depending on the size and scale of the organization, like Boys and Girls Club is a larger organization, so we have an internal learning and development department that does trainings. But a lot of our membership is small to mid-sized organizations that do not have that and rely heavily on DCYF to attend their training. So DCYF has a technical assistance and capacity building, I think that's the name of it, department that leads amazing trainings, and they partner with different consultants and organizations to facilitate trainings, and then they offer them to DCYF grantees. And then also conversations we've had is like, how do we promote it to non-DCYF grantees that are also serving youth? So the idea would be, yes, that DCYF's technical assistance department could lead some trainings or partner with organizations to facilitate these trainings, and then they can then offer it to their staff.
Thank you.
All right, John, you can go ahead and unmute.
Okay, yeah, I wanted to second what Leslie said, hear both sides of the conversation. We can also help highlight, some of the work. But I think going back to the job, why people, are not applying is, wages is definitely number one, but also a security. People are afraid to go in certain communities and do that work, and especially in D10 and sometimes in the Tenderloin. So how do we talk about security for our facilities that our youth are in? And then, these consultants, so a lot of consultants coming into the community, being, paid large amounts of money to come do these trainings and different things, but we don't have the same investments into the mentors or the folks that's doing the work. So I think those are definitely things that we need to look at, because I like what the lady said earlier, whoever said that about, some of these folks who come here overeducated are not reaching our kids. And then sometimes some of those local people that's within the community know how to reach them. So how do we empower them too to stay doing this work? So I just want to throw that in there.
Yeah, thank you, John. Yeah, I think there's a lot that was said that I think resonated with a lot of us, and a lot of the questions we might share. The question that I kind of had in mind, or maybe just a point that I was thinking about, was related to what Leslie was asking, like in terms of the trainings, like how do we see that being output for CBOs? And something that I was thinking about was, I know pre-pandemic we had like the DCYF University, and I don't know if like that was, I'm pretty sure that was almost exclusive to like DCYF involved CBOs, but I'm not quite sure. But that's something that came to mind that I was thinking about. Yeah. But yeah, thank you, Madison and Frederic, for sharing. And we can go ahead and move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the service allocation plan presentation by Umiho.
There we go. All right. Hello, everyone. As the chair said, my name is Amiho. I am the Deputy Director of Strategic Initiatives for DCYF. So first off, welcome to the new members. Welcome back to the returning members. I'm here to talk about the services allocation plan. And so, we're excited to be able to present to you about this. This is kind of where things start to really heat up for DCYF. The CNA kind of kicks us off, and the SAP, the services allocation plan, is where things start to get really serious. So we're excited to be able to unveil it to you and kind of give you a sense of how we're going to put that plan together. And let's just get started. So next slide, please. So I think it's helpful just to start us off by kind of looking a little bit back at where we've been in this cycle, as well as looking forward. So just to take us back a little bit down memory lane, in summer 2018, the 18 to 23 funding cycle, 5-year funding cycle began. And then in the fall of 2019, we actually started the community needs assessment process with what we were calling family summits. And then of course, everything stopped. Spring 2020, shelter in place, we paused everything and actually added a year to the funding cycle. So it went from being a 5-year cycle to a 6-year cycle. We picked back up the CNA in the spring of 2021. In the winter of 2022, we culminated our work on the Children and Family Recovery Plan by releasing that report. Shortly thereafter, we released the SF RISE report, which was another project that we were working on at the time. And then just a few months ago, the Board of Supervisors approved the community needs assessment. And so that takes us to where we are roughly now, started in the summertime, but with the beginning of the service allocation plan development process. And so looking ahead, our next sort of milestone is to look to get approval of the SAP in the summer of 2023. Then, and shortly thereafter, we will release a new 5-year RFP for the 24 through 29 funding cycle. In spring of 24, we will release the award announcements for that process. And then the funding cycle officially begins on July 1st of 2024. So that's kind of, that's what's sort of in brief happened in the last few years of the funding cycle, and a little bit of a look ahead to what's going to come. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of the services allocation plan, it is essentially our strategic plan for achieving our results by addressing the needs and disparities highlighted in the CNA. And these are our results areas. So children and youth are supported by nurturing families and communities. Children and youth are physically and emotionally healthy. Children and youth are ready to learn and succeed in school. And youth are ready for college, work, and productive adulthood. Those are the same results that we framed the CNA around. They're actually the same results that we framed the last allocation plan in 2017 around. And these remain 4 conditions that broadly speak to the types of results we'd like to see for children, youth, and their families in San Francisco. And so these results are still very relevant to us, and we will look to address them and try to put in place the types of programming and services that are going to help us achieve these results in the next funding cycle. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of the allocation plan itself, so just a note here on the bottom, it is a charter mandate. We are required to produce this as a part of every funding cycle. But the allocation plan, as that strategic plan, it includes several key things. So our goals, priorities, and approaches for the 24 through 29 funding cycle, the services, initiatives, partnerships, and best practices that we'll support during the funding cycle, and then funding allocations, most importantly, for services for children, youth, and their families, as well as for evaluation, technical assistance, and capacity building and outreach and promotion. Next slide, please. Now, I always like to come back to this slide. I think this is an extremely important thing for us to always be thinking about, and that is that equity is our through line, not just because it is required of the charter that we fund using an equity framework, but because it is so important to running a process that actually yields services that are going to address the needs of children, youth, and their families in San Francisco. And so equity really starts with the community needs assessment. It starts in the way that that process is grounded in community voice. It ultimately is about us talking to folks in communities around the city to try to get a better sense of what their needs and what the disparities are that are affecting them. So we use equity metrics to determine those needs and disparities, and we use disaggregated data as much as possible to really surface those racial disparities. Then when we go to the service allocation planning process, we are really funding, we're putting funding allocations in place to specifically address those CNA findings, so to specifically address those needs and disparities. We use a citywide planning process so that we can coordinate more effectively and hopefully increase the outcomes that we're trying to seek. And then we are actually required to produce an equity analysis as a part of the services allocation plan. And that really is a way for us to check our plan against our equity goals, just to make sure that we are actually reaching the folks that we intend to reach. And then when we talk about our request for proposals or RFP process, it is really about targeting funding to once again address those needs and disparities that came up in the CNA. And also it's about prioritizing the culturally competent providers that are going to be most able to actually help us achieve those results that we've set and address the needs of the communities that we know that where we know that they are happening, right? So equity is really, it's really key to how we think about the work, how we gather information about what we need to focus on, how we focus ourselves in to address those things, and then how we actually fund services, programs, and agencies that are actually going to help us achieve the equity goals that we've set. Next slide, please. Now, diving down a little bit into the service allocation plan process. So it's going to be developed using a two-part process that includes both internal and partner-based components. So in terms of the internal part, that's our service area work groups, where DCYF staff will allocate the Children and Youth Fund for services that address the needs and disparities highlighted in the CNA. And the external part, that's our partner work groups, where we'll be convening city partners and SFUSD, city and SFUSD partners in key service areas to talk about how we get into more alignment around the work that we're doing. Next slide, please. So going a little bit deeper here. So in regards to the service area work groups, they include a lot of key components. So first off, they're very heavily grounded in data. And that's really crucial because the CNA, as I said, is the basis of our process. And so they're grounded in the data and findings from the CNA, but also from SFRISE, from the Children and Families Recovery Plan, and from all the evaluations and data collection that we do throughout the funding cycle. Secondly, and this is really important to highlight, this process is really about identifying and addressing needs and disparities affecting our priority populations. And you can see here on this graphic on the right that we have several priority populations that we have called out. So there's actually, they fall into three different buckets. There's sort of a universal need, which is really all children, youth, and their families. Then there is concentrated need, which is mostly actually populations. So it includes African-American, Native American, Latinx folks, and Pacific Islander children, youth, and their families, as well as low-income Asian children, youth, and their families, as well as disconnected TAY in and of itself, families economically impacted by COVID, and then individuals with disabilities and their families. And then there are several characteristics of increased needs, which we of course know often overlap with these other groups here. And I won't list them all out, but you can see that there are several other groups that we are focused on trying to meet the needs and disparities that are affecting them. So that's a really key part of this process. That's really the most important part of this process. But additionally, we also are using this process to examine challenges with our current services, as well as to identify gaps in what we're currently doing. So it's not just about looking at what is needed for children, youth, and their families right now. It's also about looking at what we're doing right now and where we haven't quite done enough to try to make sure that we are refining the work that we're doing that is effective, adding things where needed to address new things that are coming up for folks, and generally just trying to get better about how we are providing services that actually meet the needs of children, youth, and their families. And then the last thing to point out here is that this process is actually inspired by results-based accountability, also known as RBA, which was a process that we used back in the 2017 services allocation plan. We're not going to faithfully stick to RBA like in its sort of formulaic way of being done, but we have learned a lot of things from it. And we are using several elements of it, essentially to kind of customize it into a process that better meets our needs. That was, we learned a lot in that last process about what was effective and what wasn't. And we want to use the elements that were helpful to us and sort of refine it a little bit so that it can lead to a better process that leads to better results for us as a department. Next slide, please. And then in terms of our partner work group, so once again, this is a process that's about aligning with city departments and SFUSD partners in key service areas. We're essentially going to convene our partners over several sessions to develop a shared understanding of the service landscape across our partners. We know that there are the majority of services for children and youth and their families in the city are actually operated, they're implemented by multiple departments in the school district. And so one of the things that we want to be able to do is to try to get in better alignment with all of those partners who are working on the same types of services. Because as we know, the ability for a family to actually get what they need should not be impacted by what system that they are going into. And currently, it is somewhat like that, right? So we want to try to bring our partners together to get into stronger alignment. And so that starts with just having a shared understanding of what that landscape is. And then secondarily, it's about getting into alignment around some very specific things. And those are shared approaches for our best practices. So the ways that we actually do the services, whether they're done by CBOs or whether they're done by city staff, there should be some consistency in the way that we are doing that work for the same types of services. Data collection and evaluation. We need to collect the same data to actually evaluate whether we are effective across our system. So getting an alignment around the data we collect and then developing some ways to evaluate ourselves collectively. Technical assistance and capacity building. So kind of to the point that just came up in the conversation, there is a need for us to be able to provide to sort of raise the quality of services and build capacity, not just for CBOs and grantees, also for city staff, and actually together as much as possible, to bring us together to learn together so we can develop our skills and sort of improve our ability to meet the needs of our children, youth, and their families. And then lastly, outreach and promotion. So, we have a lot of services. The city has many services, but we know that many folks are not able to access those services, often because they don't know about them. And so making sure that we are promoting and providing outreach for all of the services that we fund collectively is really important to making sure that we are getting the best usage of those services for the folks that we know who need them the most. And then lastly, the last thing about this process to note is that this is not a point in time effort. This is the beginning of an effort. So we need to do some things for our service allocation plan, and it starts with this process here. But one of the things we want to do is put in place the structure that allows us to do ongoing planning and coordination throughout the funding cycle. Because we know there are often system issues that will come up, or access issues, or coordination issues. And we want to make sure that we have a way that folks can regularly come together to discuss these issues and ultimately, lead to better services and better coordination. Next slide, please. All right, so I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and I'm going to talk a little bit here about engagement, right? And so when it comes to the allocation plan, it's important for us, obviously, to engage with our constituents, to gather feedback about those allocations, but also about the services we're funding and the system itself. And so there's sort of three different buckets here. I'm gonna talk about two of them here, and I'll talk about the next one, which is you all, the OAC, on the next slide. So starting at sort of the highest level, broad engagement, really engagement with everyone. We are actually putting the finishing touches on an online allocation tool. We're calling it the Service Allocation Planner. And that is a way for anyone who has access to the link, and we will share it widely, to tell us how they think we should spend the dollars in the Children and Youth Fund. We will share with them what the funding looks like, what it looked like on our last allocation plan, and we will share the total amount of dollars that we expect to have for the new funding cycle, so that folks can allocate as they think it should be allocated, but within context, right? We can't just allocate, money we don't have. So the idea is to get as many voices as possible, and that's something that we actually will ask for your help on as well. But we're going to make a big push around getting this out, not just to CBOs and providers and city staff, elected officials, but also children, youth, and their families. Because ultimately hearing from sort of the users of these services is super important to this process. And then secondly, and the SPWG referenced this, but we are going to do some topic-specific focus groups with grantees and service providers that we facilitate in partnership with the SPWG. And the idea there is that we know that a lot of our grantees, they want to have specific conversations with DCYF about some of the nuances of the systems that they're working in, or the challenges that they're facing, or just questions that they have about changes that are happening. And so we want to try to create space for that to happen and for it to be at a level that allows folks to really share that kind of feedback that is helpful to us and that we can incorporate in our process. So we are working on that part of the process, and we're really excited about that. Next slide. Now, in terms of you all, it's a little bit different for the OAC because you actually have an official role in this process. You essentially are the first approvers of the services allocation plan. And so for you all, it's not just about engaging with you, it's also about preparation so that you guys can fulfill this role. And so I'm going to frame this engagement slide a little bit around that. And so I think in terms of getting prepared to be that first approver of the allocation plan, the first thing, the most important thing is to read the community needs assessment. And to Frederick's point, while it's not 500 pages, it is a lot of pages, multiple hundreds of pages. And there's a lot in it, it's very dense. And just so you all know, it's just something that we actually are unpacking with our own staff right now through a long-term process where we're doing this at our required all staff meetings. So the need for us to make sure that there is a foundation of understanding where folks are really spending some time with that data is really crucial to the work that we're doing. It's also crucial for you all. So definitely encourage you to space it out a little bit and spend some time with that document so that you are really well grounded in it. Secondly, review and provide feedback on the approaches that we're going to use to develop the services allocation plan. That's what we're doing today. And so we're very happy to hear any feedback that you have. Participate in services allocation plan discussions in upcoming meetings. And so just to give an example of that, one thing that we actually are also planning to do with our staff that we'd like to do with you all is to spend some time talking about what these results areas mean to us as a department, as an OAC. What does it mean for young people to live in nurturing families and communities? That can mean a lot of different things. And so we want to have that type of process internally for our staff at sort of the highest level so we can funnel down into more specific conversations we need to have. And we think it's important for you all also to have a similar type of conversation. So that's just an example. But that's the kind of conversations that we would like to have with you all. We also would like you to help us inform your constituents about this process and help us, kind of pull their participation in where it's appropriate. So, I mentioned this online allocation tool. That is the perfect thing to share out with the folks that you're communicating with, the folks in your communities. Because like I said, we want as many voices as possible in that tool. There may be times when there are topics that it might be helpful to engage folks and have them come and either hear or participate in through public comment. And really just to make sure that folks know that this process is happening is helpful. And so, making sure you're thinking about those constituents that you represent and bringing them into this process in any way that is appropriate is going to be really important. I also want to note that it's important to maintain focus when we're talking about the allocation plan on the SAP process. In the allocation plan, we're not talking about funding requirements. We're not doing RFPs yet. We're not at that point yet. In the allocation plan, we're really at a little bit of a higher level where we're thinking about the big picture of what we're trying to accomplish and how much money we're going to put to it. And so, kind of staying in that lane until we get to the time where we start talking about the RFP, which actually will not be too long from now, is going to be really important because it gets very blurry when we start getting a little too far down the road. And that's not really what's going to happen in the allocation plan anyway. It will happen in the RFP when we get to that point, and we will talk quite a bit about that as well. And then lastly, and this was really an aspiration from your chair and co-chair, but the idea of all of this is that by the time we get to the point of approval, that you all, the OAC, have a great understanding of our results and the approaches that we're going to use to achieve them, right? If we're doing a good job in this process, then you will have that knowledge and you'll be prepared and able to actually, make a vote on this service allocation plan. So we will strive to make sure that you have as much as what you need to be able to have that understanding. And I definitely encourage you also to just remember that as you're coming into this process, that really is the goal here, for you to be as versed as possible in understanding how we are achieving the 4 results that we have set out for ourselves. Next slide. All right, so I'm going to close there and just open up to some questions or comments. I have a few topics for you all to talk through. First of all, any clarifying questions about the process, timeline, or expectation for you all? Be happy to answer those. Any reflections or thoughts about our results areas as those 4 conditions we seek for children, youth, TAY, and their families? We will talk more about it in a future session, but if there are any sort of initial thoughts or comments that you want to share, we'd be happy to hear those. And then, of course, ideas for additional ways that we can engage with you as we develop the allocation plan. We'd be happy to hear those as well. So I will open it up for any comments from you all.
Sorry, Mijo, before we go to committee discussion, I'm going to go ahead and ask for public comment. Well, thank you for all the DCYF staff working, hard to push the SAP forward and for providing our first look into the SAP. So going along with public comment, Anthony, is there any public comment on this item?
There are no speakers in the queue.
Okay. All right. So then we can go into a committee discussion, as Mijo said, with these the topics presented here. All right, Julie, do you want to go ahead and unmute?
Sure. Thanks for the presentation and all the hard work going into this. I loved seeing in the list of communities that we're really focusing on some of the communities that have been less visible before, like Native American, Pacific Islander, LGBTQ, undocumented folks. I wanted to check and confirm if all of the surveying that we're doing will have an option for families to identify as Middle Eastern, since that's a gap and a disconnect compared to census data, and a place that we really need to get more information. And then just circling back to the previous question, I know this isn't a point in time count. I'm curious if there may be data that would help us understand what the existing need is for after school-based programs, kind of the need that I flagged in the earlier question, or maybe not, and we need to get that information somewhere else.
Yeah, so thank you for that question. So in regards to the survey, so we're not at the moment, we're not planning to do additional surveying for this, but the point is still valid, that there's a need for us to take a look at and make sure that we have inclusive categories that we're using for folks to identify, and we will definitely do that. In regards to your other question, so I think it's important to note that while we have the CNA as a source of data for this process, we also have this partner engagement part of the process, as well as our own reflection about sort of the state of the service system, right? So part of what we're trying to do, and not just using results-based accountability, which is really at like a high population level, is to take a look at all of the factors that are affecting, the way that we implement services right now. So if you think about OST programming, right? Like there are a multitude of factors there. There's the need of families specifically in different communities and flexibility around time and location and things like that. There's also changes in SFUSD schedule and what that means to our providers and the need to sort of align those things together. And then there's sort of the sort of longer term, bigger picture work that's happening at the school district around how they implement their part of after school and summer programming and how we align together. So all of that to say that we are taking all of that into our process around the service allocation plan, because we want to try to spit out is something that's more effectively addressing the needs of children, youth, and their families. And that's going to include things that are impacted by what you're talking about, right? So if there is less in a specific community for a number of factors, then we want to make sure that if there is not a school-based provider that we can fund, that there may be a community-based provider, and we want to try to make a push in that way. So that's kind of the big picture of it. It's a lot more nuanced than I'm providing right now, because we have a lot of services in a lot of areas, and there's a lot of nuance in every one of them. But that's really what the task is for us, is to understand what that current state is of programming, so that we can try to address it both through what we're doing now and what needs to be added.
All right, Molly, do you want to go ahead and unmute?
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I love this. So great. This is what I've been looking for. The allocation planning conversations are going to be kind of the most robust and interesting for us as a committee, and which I'm so glad that we have new members on our committee, and that hopefully more, including youth, will be coming on to add to the expertise and the interesting conversations that we have ahead of us. So I am super, super excited. I appreciate how you guys are attacking this. It seems like a lot of work that you guys are doing, and it's all very impressive. And I appreciate the holistic view because we want to make sure that, I mean, that's part of allocating the resources efficiently across our holistic community, right? And it can come from other people as well to support our community overall. And I just wanted to say to my fellow members on the OAC is that I really am excited about having us look at, having gone through allocation planning process conversations before. I've encouraged, and I'm really excited for us to look at those 4 results and the indicators that the staff uses to ensure, are we on track or are we not? So we are all very busy people. We all have different points of view. We represent different groups and different experiences and expertises about to bring forth to the table. And so, as you can tell, the staff are the experts in terms of the process, bringing people together, getting that data together, and running the kind of the how of all this process. So I'm excited for us to kind of look higher level at the results and the indicators so we can say, you know, it seems like we as a community and our in San Francisco need to focus more on this, or we need to focus more on this. Kind of similar to the conversation we just had with the service provider working group in terms of like, you know, looking at going back all the way to kind of, well, I guess it's the chicken or the egg conversation, right? And it's like, where does the investment begin to plant the seed to make improvements that we want to see? And so if we understand kind of the results that we're aiming for, and they're the 4 results, and then even the indicators, then we can give guidance and bring forth our perspectives to the team of where we think we need to be as as a community, and then give them that direction so then they can bring forth the how in the process. Believe me, this is a very intricate, as you can tell, process. I personally don't need, I trust Maria and Miho and all the experts on the staff. I don't need to be involved in the how of the process, but I would like to bring forth the community voice in terms of like where we want to be. What does success look like for us? And this is the plan that will enable that. But I think I would love to hear from the OAC about what we think success looks like with those 4 results. So I'm super excited about all this. And all I'll say is, Amiho, as you kind of unpack some of this conversations with the findings from the CNA and apply it to conversations about the SAP, if you could guide us along as well with some of that. Yes, we will dive into the document, but if you can guide us along with that as we converse about the allocation plan, I think that we would all really appreciate it. So anyways, great work.
All right, are there any more comments from the committee? Comments or questions, I should say. All right, so I just wanted to say thank you again, Amiho, for this intro. I really love the focus on alignment within partnerships, because there's definitely been times in the past where the data collection or really rather like the sharing across departments was not very easy. So to hear that focus and like that exact issue in a working group space sounds like a great idea. And I also really love the idea of the allocation tool, because it seems like such a great way to catch people's attention while having them give input themselves, like it seems like a very accessible way. The only question that I have or almost thought is, Amiho, could you talk like a little bit more about what the equity analysis checks like might entail, and if you at this moment foresee the OAC playing a role in those in these checks?
Yeah, so the equity analysis is a required part of the services allocation plan. And basically the idea is that we're comparing our plan for the allocations against what is currently in place for children, youth, and families in San Francisco. And so, you know, there's a lot of data collection that goes into that. We obviously need to get a sense of what is actually out there what the spending is from other city departments. Pretty laborious effort to get that data from folks, but that's really key to this process. And then, we just basically essentially map that data against what our plan is to see where we have coverage, where we don't have coverage. And the idea is that hopefully we see that where the needs are, our plan is going to address them. And now we have things in place that are going to, essentially address not just the broad need, but it's kind of at the specific level. So whether that be, for specific groups, smaller populations of folks, specific locations in some cases, or types of services, there's kind of a range of different ways that plays out. Now, in terms of the OAC's role in the equity analysis, I'm not sure that there was an active role. It's a pretty data-focused effort. Although, I think any way that we can engage with you all at a high level. And so I think, talking about indicators and things like that, which obviously has some relation sort of looking ahead as opposed to looking back. I think that there's definitely room for us to engage with you all in that way. And we are still developing some of these things as we've just started this process. So, the equity analysis is a few months down the road as we start the work groups right now. But I feel like there is going to be we will develop a better sense of kind of the details of it. And I think that'll give us a chance to think about how you guys can engage with this process, whether it just, maybe it might even just be, discussion and taking a look at what it looks like now or that kind of thing. But I think any way for us to give you all a chance to kind of sit in the bigger picture, the bigger picture of how services are in place now, or how they could be in place, or sort of the nuances or intricacies of that is helpful to us. So we will try to find some ways, a little bit more specific ways than what I'm saying right now, to engage with you all around the equity analysis. Yeah, so I'll just leave it there for now.
All right, well, thank you so much for the presentation and for all the comments. And so let's go ahead and move to the 7th item on the agenda, which is the report of the OAC chair. As I said, I am the newly appointed chair. I just want to tell you all a little bit about my values and my vision. As this is my my first meeting as chair. So the first things that I was thinking about when, thinking to say just a little bit about like what I see in the vision for the OAC was just like equity, accessibility, and accountability. Those really being the main insights that I want to lead with, ensuring that equity is always at the forefront of decision-making and discussions, which I feel like it goes really hand in hand with DCYF's new equity plan, making sure that meetings feel approachable and easygoing to allow for authentic participation. I definitely wouldn't want this to feel like such a space where it's almost like, can I, we do have to follow rules and regulations, we do, by the Sunshine Ordinance, but don't want it to feel so like unauthentic, like you can't speak, especially because we do have constituents to represent. And then just having us as members be accountable to our roles while DCYF does the same. Just want to say all in all, I'm grateful for the opportunity and looking forward to working with you all. And thank you to the staff, Molly especially, for all the guidance and support through these 4 or 5 years that I've been with DCYF. So to step into this role is like, is interesting, but I'm looking forward to it. So moving right along with the report, I only have like 2 things to say. Just want to congratulate the DCYF staff on completing the CNA report. When everything seemed like it turned upside down back in spring 2020 and everything was kind of put on hold, it feels good to be moving back to our budget focused work. And then especially with the new refreshed lens of equity. And again, just want to warmly welcome John and Leslie, and we are looking forward to hopefully getting some new members, maybe at our last meeting. So by the end of this year. So just moving along to public comment. Anthony, is there any public comment on this item?
There are no speakers in the queue.
All right. So we can go ahead and move to our last item of the agenda, which is the report of DCYF Director Maria.
Oh, wait, Jada, can I interject something?
Yeah.
In your report? I just want to give everyone a quick update on our governance work that we're working on. But first, I want to say you are doing a fabulous job in your first meeting. So proud of you. You're doing a great job. I'm very excited to have you as chair. And thank you so much for sharing your kind of perspective and approach. And I appreciate that you're really being welcoming to everybody and having this being a comfortable and open space for everyone. And that said, going to governance, which sounds kind of opposite of comfort, but we're going to try and make it so that it is comfortable for us. We're working on governance especially for Leslie and John. We've been kind of starts and fits and spurts of working on governments just to try to bring clarity. And you as new members, and Aaron too, it's like we want to have some consistency and clarity about how we work and how we what our role is, what the expectations are, and how we work together. So as people come on and off the committee, which we've found over the past couple of years happens a little bit more frequently than we've wanted, and that there's continuity and consistency. So the public's voice is always being represented well and is being shared to help improve the work of the staff. So we've kind of done some work about our some role clarity, and now we're going into folding that into looking at our bylaws and making sure that there are things that are up to date. So we're going to take that work offline from this meeting and work in the committee. So we have an executive committee, and we'll have an executive committee meeting set up in the next few weeks that Rebecca will announce. And at that meeting, we're going to take a look at our bylaws, and in advance of the meeting, we'll prep everybody. So people, if you can either send comments in if you can't make the meeting, or you can join the meeting will be public. So we'll just kind of go over that and look and see what improvements we can make on the bylaws. One is, for example, like currently it's a pre-pandemic bylaws. So it says we will always meet at DCYF. Well, clearly we are not doing that. So we just need to make some adjustments and making sure that we're reflecting kind of the vibe and the mood that we want here and to get our work done. So, and just so it's easy for members like you to come on and dive right in and participate and share the voice of your community with DCYF. So stay tuned, look out for that meeting announcement along with the pre-read. And again, if you can't, it's optional, totally optional. But if you can't make it, you're always welcome to share your feedback in with me or Jada verbally. We can get on a call separately, one-on-one, or you can email me or Jada one-on-one. So we can do it that way. And then we will share all the feedback so the public is aware of what's going on. So that is to come. And that's it.
All right, thank you, Molly. Okay, so we can go ahead and go to our director report. So I'll hand it over to you, Maria.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chair Jada. Thank you so much for just being fantastic and running a very tight meeting. Kudos to you. I know. And then welcome to our new members, Leslie and John. Thank you so much for also contributing today, and hopefully with the vibe and the tone of the conversation today, you get a taste of where we're going to go and the big, I love it, vision that DCYF wants to move towards, which is to definitely find ways at literally every corner to infuse equity into our conversation, into our behavior, into our mindset, but then also to make everything as accessible and as user-friendly as possible. So thank you for joining us in this endeavor. I actually only have 3 very short things to share with everyone today. One is to call your attention to the DCYF OAC webpage. Thank you so much to Rebecca, Corteza, and Dory for updating the OAC website. So for those, I'll drop this into the chat. If you all want to jump on it, check it out. It shows, has a little more description about each of your seats. If you've submitted a bio and a picture, thank you, because we are uploading that. If you have not, here is your public request to send it to us. It's also a great way for our public to know who is actually on this body. It's a strategy for us to make sure that there is more transparency. But it is a long time coming for us to update this website. Another page that we have recently updated is our Summer in San Francisco website or portal. I'm not sure what you call it, but it's a new place or a new part of the DCYF website where you can learn more about what happened this summer. So for all of the things we keep talking about summer together and all the excitement, but if you want to have a feeling of what it was like, go in there, dive, get lost in all the videos that we have on the website, get lost in all the beautiful pictures of the children and their smiles and laughter and the look of exhaustion on staff's faces. Please just go there and just check it out. It's really beautiful. It's amazing to know that DCYF with our CBO partners and other city department partnership and the school district this summer was able to provide summer programming opportunities to over 25,000 children in the city, and to ensure that these young people had access to everything ranging from dance and art to literacy and math and STEM and internship opportunities. So it's a real proud moment for us because this was something that was a heavy lift, but we did it and we did it together. So amazing. And then my last update is a little bit more administrative, like what Molly was talking about governance. Is that Rebecca sent to everyone the political activity memo from our city attorney. So I really would like to ask all of you to please review that memo to make sure you understand the memo. In a nutshell, the memo lays out all of the it calls out all the activities that are not allowable by members of committees and city officials. And so in summary, it's just making sure that you don't use city resources to do any type of political activities. You can't do political activities when you're on city time. So during this time, you're volunteering, but you're part of an advisory body. So no political activities during this time. And there's a lot of restrictions around campaign solicitations and campaign contributions. So please just look at that, review that, make sure you understand it, and just know what it is. And that's it for me. Right now, we are eyeball deep in all things SAP, Services Allocation Planning, and all things data. So you will continue to be very engaged by us in some of these deeper conversations around, how do we focus and how do we do more targeted funding for certain populations, and what are our hopes and dreams for our children and families in the next RFP cycle. So thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Maria. Anthony, is there any public comment on this item?
There are no speakers in the queue.
All right, for the committee members, are there any comments, questions on Maria's report? All right, okay, so seeing none, we can move on to our very last item, which is just a review of the action items, and then we can formally adjourn. So the action items, or rather note, is just to look out for, as Molly mentioned, the upcoming optional executive meeting for the governance work. So to be coming out soon in the next few weeks. And then, as Maria said, to review the memo sent out by Rebecca and reach out if you have any questions. But I don't think we need to formally call for a vote to adjourn. Is that correct?
Dory, is that, can we
Yeah.
do same?
Yeah, you can.
You
just-
don't need to, yeah,
You could just go
Okay.
ahead and adjourn.
Okay.
just state the time, please.
Okay, perfect. So we will be adjourning this meeting at 4:25 on the dot. So thank you everyone for coming. And yeah, we'll see each other soon. All right.